feel nothing, I feel great. I leave my body by mistake. I feel nothing, I feel great. I leave my body by mistake. I know there's water when I'm dreaming. I know that pops will never see me. I know mama's really bleeding, trapped in that basement we believed in. I feel nothing, I feel great. I leave my body by mistake.
Welcome to TEDxYouth at HAIS 2022 premiere. We're honored to have you here.
Due to the spread of COVID-19, we will be delivering you our event online. Our speakers have worked really hard to deliver you the speech.
This video will be delivered in premiere. The full video will be available on our school YouTube channel.
We hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
What do you feel when you post yourself on social media? What do you feel when you receive 100 likes? Validation seeking is a desire for people to agree and approve of you. It is nothing more than a blank sheet of paper with an approval stamp. It is a contract with society. But this paper is what drives anxiety, jealousy, and temporary relief for people, especially in Japan. Let's take a look at validation-seeking behaviors on social media. Say, Instagram. We all know that stories are, as the name implies, as a collection of videos and photos users upload that will expire in 24 hours. People can share their feelings, create random polls, or post pictures. They can see who viewed the story, who pressed a poll, or reacted to your shares. This type of interaction makes you feel like people aren't ignoring you, making you feel included in society. I once shared a story, a Japanese-style poll called Hitokoto, where the whole purpose is to give short comments to people who press a poll and create a conversation from it. When I realized how many people ignored my story, I unconsciously accepted as a validation of my unworthiness. Why didn't she respond to me online, even if she talked to me at school? Maybe she didn't respond to me because she doesn't consider me as her friend. Well, I was validating invalid assumptions based on people's responses on social media. According to Harvard University, engagements on social media light up one part of our brain, the same reaction when we take addictive substances. the dopamine effect. The sense of pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation is recorded in our memory, craving for similar experiences. We crave more audience engagements. It's all between you and a friend, you and a crush, you and a stranger, feeding off each other by validating each other. We crave more engagements from them just because you want that one extra pull to start a conversation with a crush. We post more and more to see what works, what makes your crush respond to your shares. With social media taking over every seconds and minutes, we are dictated by likes and shares due to validation seeking playing a part. As a part of Gen Z, I am starting to see signs of my generation using likes to judge their appearance, social status, and/or self-worth. According to Mercando, there are more than 2 billion Gen Zs worldwide. This massive population is exposed to all the comments, likes, and posts, and yet they fail to understand that they are only seeing a glimpse of other people's lives. Stories and posts, just by looking at 5 seconds of their day, could make you assume things that might not be the truth. What we think we see is only a second of their 24,828 seconds of their day. And yes, I did calculate that. From this, we can understand how our tendency to seek validation and addiction together creating a toxic impact on us. There is a term widely known in Japan called hibo chusho. This term was originally used separately. Hibo meaning saying badly of a person, and chusho, a statement that has no evidence. Too often, these slanders and false statements were made online or offline that people started to use these words together. And that is why when Japanese people hear the word hibochusho, we imagine all the damage, pain, and toxic thoughts people have gone through. We are exposed to all those dopamine effect, the shares and the likes, that we think our validation outweighs the risk of hibochusho. Why the number of likes means a lot of Japanese Gen Zs. The thing is, we don't have to rely on social media to have a confirmation stamp on our blank sheet of paper. Our tendency to see validation is not something limited to SNS. It existed with millennials and generations. We all have moments where we spit out a white lie just to stay in a good relationship with our friends. We all have moments where we couldn't say no to things we didn't want to do, just to satisfy the other person. We all have moments where we wanted someone to compliment us. Validation doesn't have to come with likes. It can be something as simple as a hug or a compliment. We always get carried away by those numbers that we forget to look at things that make us truly feel. We seek validation because we don't have enough of it. But the truth is, you can't actually find the validation on social media. It's actually in here. You have to validate yourself and realize your self-worth. This may take some time, but if you slowly walk towards finding validation from within, we may not get fooled by those silly likes anymore. Thank you.
How many of you have this? Why do you have it? And most importantly, how do you use it? How many of you have seen a family gathered around a dining table, getting ready to eat? but all of them are on their phones. Or two friends sitting side by side, not having a conversation, but on their phones. Compared to the millennials, 1977 to 1995, who barely had any devices they could get addicted to, we are suddenly given these devices and the distractions that come with them. Now think about it. Is it common for people to be seen without their phones? At home, on trains, even on the street where they're walking? No. Phones are everywhere, and they're growing. There are dangers to this collective use of technology. Let me talk about a story where a lady visited an event organized by social media. There were all these influencers, people who'd spent half their lives telling others to stay off their devices and to live life in the real world. Now these very influencers, instead of heading for people to make real connections, headed for the most Instagram-worthy spots, snapped pictures of themselves, and posted it on their social media. Now this lady tried to walk around, trying to talk to all the interesting new people, but wherever she went, no one seemed to have time to talk to her because everyone was too busy on their phones. According to the Global Web Index, the average daily time spent on social media alone is 2 hours and 24 minutes, when the recommended time on devices overall is only 2 hours. So you see, just our time on social media exceeds that limit. A story from ABC News is about a girl who got caught up in the wrong side of social media. Brooke, a 12-year-old, got an iPhone for her birthday. In the 6th grade, she started to get obsessed. She had all kinds of apps, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, and she'd have it. She'd stay up to 4:30 waiting for someone's message. It got so bad that in the end, she started to feel signs of depression and suicidal thoughts. So you see, the overuse of digital devices can result in major psychological issues such as depression or much, much worse. An American think tank called the Pew Research Center and the NIH, National Institute of Health, have linked these disorders with the high level of social media use. You know the feeling when you're scrolling down your social media feed and an ad pops up and you get annoyed, right? Well, here's the thing. These advertisers pay the social media platforms to put in their ads so that we would see them. And when we see them, there's a little chance we might like what we see, get interested in it, and maybe even buy it. And when we buy it, there's a slight chance we might buy it. And when we buy it, they are getting the money they paid earlier back. So our attention is the product that is being sold to advertisers. Speaking of business, we often find that we like our feed so much we don't want to put it down. First, it recommends us 2 videos we want to watch, just a little while longer. Then it recommends us 4 more, a little while longer. And I'm sure more than half of you have wondered, how does it know what I want to watch? Well, this is tech we're talking about. When you click on something, a post or a video, that click is saved, and that social media platform identifies the category of video or post you watched, and uses that to keep recommending you those things over and over again on your feed, since that is what makes them profit. In other words, they use algorithms. And if you're wondering what algorithms are, they're a way of sorting out the user's feed based on what they watch and recommending them videos. This tracking and data brings us to our next point. Another point we need to discuss is online privacy. As I said earlier, our data is being tracked. To be able to keep us on the screen, they need data about us, and they have it. They have data about us, but we need to think about what they do with that data. This is where privacy comes into play. They are tracking our use online, and our privacy isn't secure anymore. In order to keep certain information private, there are settings you can do. For example, when you open up a brand new Instagram or Facebook account, the settings usually haven't been activated. So turning them on can give you a little bit more privacy. But if these social media platforms are constantly tracking our use online, then how do we protect our privacy completely? Well, we can't, and we have no choice. Now, social media is just a tool that is currently being programmed to take advantage of our psychology. I would like to talk about one more problem. For all Gen Zs, have you heard of bedtime procrastination? Bedtime procrastination is when you give up some of your sleeping time to do something else. And in this case, to use that time to do things like watching TikTok late into the night until you suddenly realize it is 5 a.m. By a show of hands, who thinks that sleep is important? It is really important, and us giving up some of that time to do something else is a sign of addiction. According to the Sleep Health Foundation, data collected from over 85,000 teenagers proves that the overuse of devices is resulting in less sleep. And when we think about it, a couple of years ago, people used to read before sleeping. But now, devices are our replacements for books too. We are starting to use these devices more and more, but do you see how our use is increasing? We are changing our lifestyle and the way we live. Now, hearing everything I've said so far, you must be thinking, I'm telling you to get rid of social media right now. But that is not the case at all. What I am saying is that we use it intentionally, purposefully, consciously. In other words, mindfully. And now what does that mean? When we do something mindfully, we do it so that we have control over our use there, and in this case, over social media. We can fight this urge of addiction. We can control our use online, and here's how. Firstly, turn notifications off. Next, educate the people around you about the dangers of overusing devices. Lastly, especially, educate children about how limiting our use online can be beneficial to us. Next, we can find other things to do on social media. For example, we can use it but set limits for ourselves. Have a purpose for going there. Be conscious when you use it so that it's a privilege, not a habit. Lastly, let's use our strengths to find what we are good at. Think about it. What are you good at and what do you enjoy? As you can see, these devices may be very important and useful, but having control over ourselves is really important. We may wish to scroll through social media for an unlimited amount of time, and we may want to keep up with the newest iPhone trends, but having control over ourselves is really important. We have our own priorities and goals, and meeting them is our responsibility. So let's all make sure to use these devices in a way that makes them a privilege, not a habit. Thank you.
How often have you heard the phrase, young people these days are so, followed by some negative attribute like lazy, entitled, or whatever the most recent complaint is? Even back in the year 1330, Kenko Yoshida wrote, "Today's young people show off their knowledge and try to use words that are different from others. How poorly educated they are." I'm Generation X, but I didn't come here to say young people these days are so in the same way that Kenko Yoshida did. In fact, quite the opposite. My daughter is a first generation Zers, and she's always gently teaching her mother and grandmother how to use a smartphone. To me, Gen Z is definitely a generation that is better at dealing with smartphone technology than we are. But if you would allow me for a moment, let's try to think back one generation in time. Imagine if you didn't have Wi-Fi or 4G or 5G in your daily life. When I was your age, we didn't have it. But to the people of the time, the X meant that we were the new cutting-edge generation in front of the curve. Yes, we were new. So, in reference to the fact that you Generation Zers are known as digital natives, I would like to share with you today my own experiences with technology as a representative of Generation X. The earliest television I can remember were black and white. But by the time I was in elementary school, they had changed to color. Telephones had already changed from digital phone to push-button phones. There was only one phone in the living room, so naturally conversation with friends could be overheard. And I was not allowed to use the phone more than 30 minutes. Of course, there was no email either. My father was also a teacher, so we had an electric typewriter in the house, which I thought was quite advanced. The only electric device I had in my room was red double radio cassette tape recorder. Whenever I had a song I liked on the radio, I would quickly press the red button to record it on the tape. As a college student, a pager became my newest portable digital device. When I was having lunch with my friend in the school cafeteria, I saw someone's number on my pager, and I would run to the payphone. There was usually a line about 4 or 5 people, and I would use my telephone card to make a call. If the person was at home, I could talk to him or her, but sometimes I would just send a code to their pager. Then, all of a sudden, in my 3rd year of college, cell phone appeared. I was even able to send short messages. Of course, messaging was not free like now. There was a charge per message and a character limit. Take a look at these cameras. They were both made in the 1970s. Actually, the Pentax camera on the left belonged to my father, and Mamiya on the right was purchased secondhand by my daughter last year. My daughter is a photographer as a hobby on weekends. She said that she prefers film images over those produced by digital cameras. I haven't taken a picture with film since I bought my first digital camera in 1995, which is 27 years ago. The same kind of evolution can be seen in the way music delivery has changed. What kind of device do you use to listen to music? Probably your smartphone and earphones, right? There is now a magical world where you don't need to carry around a music device, just a smartphone. And you can instantly access the cloud or internet, listen to thousands of music. Or even search for songs you don't know. In my day, I would like to visit live music venue and go out to listen to jazz that play LP records or with pianos. This is because I knew the sound and atmosphere could not be experienced with electric device alone. I suppose you can still do that, but now you have YouTube to catch up all the live concerts you missed. For Gen Z folks, the memory capacity of early digital device would have seemed useless. When I first started working at the school, there was only one computer in the office. I could only sit at the computer with a floppy disk containing my data when I needed to process a grade or print out a document. Interestingly, those floppy disks got smaller and smaller every year while having increased memory capacity. And 3 years after I joined the school, word processors were discontinued and each person was given their own computer to use. Can you imagine how much data this single 3.5-inch floppy can hold compared to a 128 giga USB stick? It's funny, isn't it? But we still use the floppy disk icon to represent save. By the way, this is the first computer I ever used, and the one on the right is the first computer I bought myself. The iMac series was a revolutionary product that Steve Jobs created after he came back to Apple, and it was a big trend at that time. How did I use the internet with this stylish iMac? First, you had to plug out the jack from your landline telephone and connect it to the computer. Then you start up the computer internet. I waited for about 30 seconds for the connection to go beep, 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 beep. It was incredibly slow. It was normal to wait about 10 seconds for the next page to load up. Wi-Fi and high-speed internet are a big change. Just now, I talked about the changes in technology I have experienced in only a few decades. I'm still working, and I have managed to catch up with, adapt to the ever-evolving technology. I want to give myself a pat on the back, and I hope I have your admiration for that. Anyway, Generation Z folks, you are now brilliant young people who are on the cutting edge. But technology keeps changing, and you will have to adapt to it at the rapid pace. Kenko Yoshida, who lived 700 years ago, said, "In a world of impermanence, there is no such thing as staying the same." I think this proverb can be applied to our life today. It turns out that we humans have the ability to create new tools, one after another. But we must combine that ability with respect for all life on the planet and meet the challenges of the moment. We will always have a new way to listen to music, or a faster internet speed, or endless digital memory. But those changes will mean nothing to future generations. What's important is having the wisdom to make good decisions, and that is something that hasn't changed since the time of our ancestors. Young people these days are more evolved than Generation X. From elementary school, they are thinking about the SDGs to protect the planet. They see possibilities in space, and they embrace diversity. But remember, it's not just about being good at technology. It's about using technology to make the right decision for your future. I'm sure you can do it. Thank you for your attention.
Racism for societies is basically what a virus is for computers. As we all know, viruses prevent computers from working properly. Similarly, racism undermines the well-being of a society. Now, I would like to give you a moment to think about what racism means to you. How would you define racism? Maybe you have experienced racism. Perhaps it did not make you feel good. Racism is simply an individual or a group of people being racially discriminatory against another individual or group of people. For example, this could be not hiring someone because of their race or ethnicity, or not socializing properly, being rude to someone, maybe even violently, because of their race or ethnicity. Hi, I'm Say, and I'm here to talk about racism and Gen Z. Racism is something that is important to me. I care about racism, and there's two main reasons why. First, I see how racism affects my peers and Gen Z, and I don't like it. Racism has made Gen Zers have suicidal thoughts as well as depression, and this is only two examples. Another reason is that I'm just interested in discrimination and racism in general. It's something that I'm passionate about. That's why I wrote an article about racism. I'm on TED Talk right now about racism. I'm doing an exhibition on a specific form of discrimination. Racism and racial equality is a key social issue to Gen Z because so far, Gen Z is ethnically and racially the most diverse generation. Kim Parker, the director of social trends research at Pew Research Center, who has a bachelor's and a master's degree in many topics such as generational change, and Ruth Ilganik, senior researcher at Pew Research Center, who has a master's degree in public policy, wrote an article about the biggest issues Gen Z is facing. And guess what? Racism made that list. Now, as you can see, racism is one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue Gen Z is facing. And even many millennials agree. Gen Z values and acknowledges interracial marriage as well as racial diversity, most likely more than the majority of millennials and older generations. Now, Gen Z have been trying to spread awareness, trying to take action by spreading awareness of racism on social media, especially Instagram. On Instagram, I have seen people post posts about racism, hashtagging it something like Stop Asian Hate or hashtag BLM. For instance, on June 2nd, 2020, over 26 million people has posted a plain black square, hashtagging it either hashtag BLM or hashtag Blackout Tuesday. This was a Blackout Tuesday. And the BLM posts you see on your feed on social media, most likely the majority of the people who posted those posts are Gen Z. This is why I think that social media has made Gen Z acknowledge and want to take action and value racism. I think this shows how racism affects Gen Z to take action, and vice versa, how Gen Z affects racism. Now, I've been talking about how other people take action on racism, so now I bet you're wondering, how can you take action? Well, firstly, you should take action, and you might also be wondering if you should post something on social media like I was talking earlier. Well, yes and no. Well, yes, because I guess it is still a way of taking action, and it is still good. No, because there are many other ways to take action that is more effective. Okay, let me tell you some of them. So, one of the most common things you would see people doing when there's like a situation like this is donating. Now, donating can be hard because many people try to take advantage of situations like these by setting up fake charities and donation sites. So you would have to be careful. But donate to charities that you trust. I would recommend Amnesty International, for example, and Unite for Change. You can also donate at companies, which is kind of unlikely, but if you find a donation box in public for racial equality, I would say go for it and donate. Now, I might not state the purpose clearly, but if you find it, I think you should go for it. Okay, another way to take action is protest. Two things about protest. First, you could join protests, and second, I will explain later, so joining protests, you could join protests, and yeah, it's kind of self-explanatory, but on some places it's more uncommon for protests to happen than other places. But for example, on June 14, 2020, there were over 3,500 protesters for BLM in Tokyo. Now you could join protests like these, and you could make a little poster and use it. Now the other thing about protests is helping the protesters. Now you could bring food and water to help the protesters there. Yeah. So the third way to take action is to sign petitions. Now, there are many websites you could go to sign petitions. I would recommend petition sites like iPetition or change.org. For those who don't know what a petition is a way of getting your voice heard, a request asking the government or the people in charge to take action on something, and you go to people to sign it. Now, another way you could take action is by educating yourself. Yeah, it might sound kind of weird. So there are many ways you could do this by educating yourself on racism. For example, you could watch documentaries and movies on racism to improve your knowledge. Now, I don't want to list because I haven't really watched any movies about racism, but there are many movies that you could find online. And another thing is reading articles and books of racism. For example, I read the book Dear Martin by Nick Stone, and I would actually recommend anyone to read that book. It's a pretty good book. Yeah, another way is to watch videos on racism to improve your knowledge. But I kind of didn't want to add this because like videos, there are many videos and many of them isn't that professional and good. But if you think that it's a professional one, then I would say go for it. Yeah. In concluding, how did social media affect your perception towards racism for you to form an opinion? What about the next generations? What factors of this generation do you think will be affecting the future generations? Will it be social media again? If so, how? Thank you.
I was surprised a few years ago when I had to check my screen time for an activity we did in class and noticing that I spent half a day on my phone. It's not the total amount of time I spend on technology, like my laptop or my iPad. It's just my phone. But what was more surprising for me was that most of my other classmates spend an equal amount of time on their phone, or even more than half a day. And it depends on whether you like to watch movies, you like to play games, you like to watch videos on YouTube, you like to listen to music, but I think people in their mid-teens like to do at least one of them. People may argue that the time we spend on social media is a waste. Parents and sometimes teachers, they often yell at us to surf less and study more. If you had time to spend on our phones for half a day, why not study for an extra half day? If you have the time to watch Minecraft videos on YouTube, why not watch Khan Academy? Social media and technology isn't essentially a bad thing, but what's scary is the addictive element. Also be aware that using technology and social media can have an effect on our health. And when I'm saying can, I'm implying a correlational significance and not a causation, because there are trillions of other factors that affect our health as well. And I think the so-called anti-techs would also argue about the social psychological effect and how it causes isolation or fosters an environment of criticism, defamation, and denigration. People often argue that using our phone too much would affect our posture if we have our necks bent forward and our backs rounded. And I think this is indeed true, because the things in this device, in this magical device, nails your attention, makes you forget about all the other things, like your posture, your time, the station you have to get off, and sometimes the fact that your friends have left you and you're sitting alone in a classroom with your phone, still watching anime. Our phones can have an effect on our eyes as well. The blue light from our screen can cause blurry visions, eye strains, and some of us may have had to purchase a pair of glasses because we can no longer read words a meter away from us. Using your phone or even your devices before sleep can affect your sleep. And recently I had this weird experience when I wanted to sleep and I needed sleep and my body was in sleep mode, but my eyes said no because my eyes wanted to watch a few more episodes of Attack on Titan. I think the worst part of technology, an anti-tech would argue, are those bad habits and health issues it may accompany, and how especially social media can facilitate isolation or can be used to insult others. Well, does that mean we shouldn't use our phone? That's not the case. Does that mean we should start reading books? I mean, if that works for you, I think it's a fantastic idea, but I'm sure most of the people would refuse to even let go of their phones, even for a day. I believe it's important to know those risks and all the possibility that I believe it's important to know those risks and the possibility that we might be hurting others and we don't. I believe it's important for us to know all the risks and the possibility that we might be hurting others when we don't intend to. While technology and social media offers a new means of communication, they should be an alternative and not the only one. But regardless, time is ticking, is constantly ticking, and overuse of technology can affect our study habits. I personally think that time I spend on my phone is such a waste of time. And I think the majority would relate with the point that our phone just doesn't let us leave, or maybe we don't leave our phones. The question is all the time we spend on social media, on our devices, on our phone, a waste of time? Recently, I was wondering if I could make use of all the time I spend on my Instagram account, my TikTok feeds, to study more. I started using the focus mode function on my phone and actively restricted myself from using the phone. Well, guess what? In the next minute, I was already on my TikToks. But it was the moment when I encountered a video on TikTok that is rather educational, talking about the mystery of time conception. The video was rather enlightening for me, as I was struggling to find a topic for my math essay. And I noticed the connection between the video and possible areas of math. And at the end of the day, I wrote a whole 4,000-word essay on the math behind the perception of time. And it was the first time I actually thought social media and my phone was beneficial and useful. Another time, I was struggling to come up with the idea for a product design. And especially because the items around us are already fantastically designed. Social media, once again, was a game changer. And a post on Instagram gave me an insight into a possible design idea. Since then, I don't perceive my phone or even my social media account as a waste of time or just merely entertainment. I value the time I spend on social media as part of my learning process, something that provides us an opportunity to encounter new concepts and ideas and an igniter of interests. This is not only limited to social media. With everything we do on our devices, if we change the way we view them, we can make beneficial use of the media and technology around us. A classmate of mine took Minecraft as an opportunity to connect with probability in math. And I thought it was a genius idea because now he can play Minecraft during class by simply saying that it was for educational purposes. It was also a genius idea because he was able to make use of all the time he spent on Minecraft, not just as means of entertainment, but as an educational tool and opportunity. He simply changed the way he viewed Minecraft and encountered a new concept. All the time we thought, or at least I personally thought, as a waste of time, was actually an ignored opportunity for us to expand the world around us, to find out about the billions and trillions of unknowns in the universe, to meet with what would be a savior of your life in DP, or even what would eventually become your future career. So no matter what others say about how our phones or social media is trash, or makes us lazy beings, or is a distraction to your studying, say no. It's the ticket to an educational journey. But it all depends on how we consume those information, merely as an entertainment or as game changers of life. Thank you.
Hey guys, really nice to be here for TEDxYouth Japan 2022. I know I can't be here in person, but due to the COVID stuff, obviously we still have to do stuff remote. So super excited to be here, and konnichiwa. So what I'm going to be talking about today is why nothing can stay secret forever, and why one day all of our conversations will be cracked. And it's kind of ironic because I work at a secure messaging company that attempts, as much as possible to keep your messages secure. So why should I be talking about how all of our conversations are going to be cracked in the future? Basically, I'm trying to look at the systems that we currently have in place and the historical systems that we've used, and then draw out conclusions about what might happen in the future from those. So hopefully you get a better understanding of the systems we use and what might happen in the future to those systems as well. So the first thing that we should discuss is what the methods for compromise actually are. What would be used to actually crack our messages in the future? So there's two aspects we should always look at when we're looking at this. We should look at message delivery, which is essentially how the message gets to the destination that you're talking to. And then we should also talk about the message contents, what's actually contained inside of that message. And a successful compromise needs to target both of these areas. They need to compromise the delivery method, as in intercept the message in delivery, and then if the message is encrypted, they need to compromise the contents of that message too. So what are some of the most early methods of delivery that we use? And these are systems that we had very early on, before we had any type of message encryption for the contents. So we would use stuff like couriers or pigeon post or telegrams. And all of these systems basically rely on the security of the delivery method. And that's the part where they all kind of fall apart, is that you have a plain text message, which is essentially a message that you're writing to someone. It doesn't have any type of encryption, and if the message delivery method is compromised, then everything else falls apart. So most of these systems try to focus on having the delivery be as secure as possible. So say, for example, you're sending a courier to someone else, you might send them with a few guards, or you might tell the courier the message and it's in their head, so that even if they're captured at some point, they don't have a written message on them, for example. But they all lack proper encryption methods. So the first kind of early methods, or the basic anatomy of cryptography that we start seeing in the beginning, is essentially this idea that we can have a plain text, which is the message that you want to send to someone. You have a key, and then you combine that with a cipher, and you end up with a ciphertext, which is essentially like a jumbled version of the plain text that is unreadable without the key. So what are some of the earliest methods? We basically see stuff like Caesar ciphers in the earliest senses. And essentially, these will take an alphabet, say you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then you'll shift the letters of that alphabet a certain predisposed kind of shifting. And then those letters will now encode for different letters. So for example, instead of A being encoding for A, it actually encodes for X. And then instead of F encoding for F, it encodes for C. And then you have, for example, a plain text message like cat, which becomes ZXQ, for example, if you use a traditional Caesar cipher. So these were kind of the earliest methods that we used. And the key for a Caesar cipher is essentially how much you've shifted the alphabet along. So in this system, we use the key 3, denoting the amount of times that denoting the shift that we've actually made in the alphabet. More complex versions of these are essentially still substitution ciphers. So we have this thing called a Jefferson disk, which is like 26 different individual disks, which have an alphabet jumbled in them in different ways. And then the key is actually the order of these disks, and the ciphertext encodes a position on these disks that you kind of, you put your disks in that position, you jumble them all up, and you'll put in the ciphertext, and then the ciphertext corresponds to an actual message that is written somewhere else on the disk. And it just goes into increasing complexity of substitution ciphers here. So we have the Enigma machine as well at the further end of these substitution ciphers. So those are kind of substitution ciphers. And we go into what are the weaknesses of these substitution ciphers. So we still have to share a key. So each substitution cipher has a key that I talked about before, this 3-letter shift, or the order of the disks that we have, and that has to be communicated to someone through a secure or insecure channel. And most of the times the channels that you're going to have are insecure. So if the key is compromised in that channel, then the rest of the cipher basically falls apart, because you can't encrypt anything with it anymore that can't be decrypted once the key is known. And then there's also methods of cryptanalysis as well, stuff like known plain text attacks, which was used specifically in Germany, or the British used it against the Germans in World War II to work out with what the Enigma machine was encoding for. And they also had these other systems as well, which would allow them to, even with known plain text attacks, you kind of need some computation. So they developed these early systems, early computers that would be able to iterate through different combinations as well to find out what the Germans were encrypting in their messages to each other. So what's the kind of evolution of this? So essentially the first evolution of this that we have in the 1970s is symmetric encryption. And basically this is dealing with, or the security properties provided by trapdoor functions. So these are essentially functions that are easy to compute in one direction, but very hard to compute in the other direction. So you have stuff like, or the properties that this provides to cryptographic systems is that it's easy to generate keys, it's easy to encrypt and decrypt messages if you have the right keys, but it's very difficult to go in the opposite direction in terms of if you don't have the key for a particular encrypted message, then you can't go back from that ciphertext into the plain text very easily. And the first kind of system that we had using these properties was called DES. And it had some problems, which we can look at before. The weaknesses of DES, which was the first like kind of symmetric cryptographic system, was that the keys were really short. And these keys still needed to be communicated over insecure channels as well. So we still had that problem that we had before. If the channel isn't secure, you're communicating this 56-bit key. If that gets stolen, then all future messages encrypted with that key can be decrypted. So where do we go from here? Well, one of the biggest breakthroughs that we saw was asymmetric encryption. So this is the idea of not just having one key, but splitting that key up into two key pairs, and essentially having a public and a private part of that key pair. So when you want to encrypt someone, you essentially send them your public key, they encrypt for that public key, and then the person who holds, or you in this circumstance, you hold the private part of that public key, and that gives you the ability to decrypt in that situation. And you can communicate the public key over insecure channels. So anyone can read that public key that you communicate to your friend, and still, as long as they don't have the private key for that conversation, which you keep locally to yourself, they will never be able to decrypt someone who encrypts information for that public key. So this was kind of a breakthrough because it solved that problem of using insecure channels. We can now use insecure channels to establish strong cryptographic systems. And the kind of first system that we had out of this was called RSA, and it's still actually used today, just not so much because it's a little bit less efficient than some of the schemes that we've come up with down the track. And it's very secure against cryptanalysis. It obviously doesn't have this key distribution problem as well, as long as you use a key of the appropriate length. So what are so I've kind of described two of the systems that are at the forefront of encryption right now: symmetric encryption, which is a fixed key that you have to communicate, and then asymmetric encryption, which you can communicate over an insecure channel. The attacks against these systems are kind of different. So symmetric encryption, you're basically just relying on having enough compute power to throw at the problem. So you just try and, for every ciphertext that you have, you can try different keys and try and see if there's decryption there. And if the key length is sufficiently small, you can try all of those combinations within a certain amount of time. And this is why we've been increasing keys over time as computation power increases with Moore's law, or close to Moore's law, which basically just says that the computation power increases in a non-linear way. It increases exponentially, essentially. That's starting to break down a little bit, but the core concept still kind of holds that we increase our computation power, and then therefore we need to increase the length of our keys that we're using in symmetric encryption algorithms. And in asymmetric encryption, essentially the biggest breakthrough these days has been quantum computers. And what does a quantum computer do? It essentially uses qubits in superpositions, which I'm not going to be able to fully explain here because I've only got 20 minutes. But the biggest thing that it enables is massive parallelism. So instead of having to try every single operation serially, so trying one operation, then the next, then the next, and the next, you can try multiple operations in parallel at the same time. And that has a really negative effect on some of the functions that we use or that we think are hard for some of our asymmetric encryption algorithms. So the discrete logarithm problem and prime factorization become easier with quantum computers at a sufficient level. And that would break both RSA, which is more used in legacy systems these days, but also elliptic curve cryptography, which is basically used across the entire internet these days. To encrypt every single piece of information, basically all your banking information, files, everything that you would have on your phone, for example. And both of those are broken by quantum computers. But there's an important thing to mention here, which is that although quantum computers exist right now, they don't really exist in a state where they can yet break those algorithms. Most scientists on this topic would say that we need millions of qubits, and the current quantum computers only have on the order of hundreds of qubits. So there's still a lot of development to go in the quantum computer space. It's just that we know theoretically with the algorithm, there's some algorithms that have been designed with quantum computers in mind, that theoretically they could break asymmetric encryption protocols that we currently use. And also with the state of quantum computers, they need to be kept in special rooms, away from magnetic interference and electrical interference, and at a particular temperature as well. Most of them operate at 0 Kelvin, so they need to be cooled with like liquid nitrogen and stuff. So where does this bring us? Essentially, it's a cat and mouse game. So cryptographers will create a cryptographic system, and then either the same cryptographers will find cryptanalysis methods that can be used on that cryptographic system that will break it, or there'll be a fundamental change in the way that we use computers that can break that system, whether that's computers getting much more powerful, orders of magnitudes more powerful than when the algorithm was designed, or a new paradigm in computing like quantum computers, which can break some of our existing algorithms. Already in the space of asymmetric encryption, we're looking into algorithms that use lattice-based cryptography, which is resistant against quantum computers. So we can already see that there's new cryptographic systems being built to deal with a theoretical threat in the future. And this is always going to be the case with these cryptographic systems, that they always evolve. But we can only expect that the cryptographic systems that we use today will eventually be broken in the future. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here and talk about that, and I hope you learnt a little bit about encryption and the standards that we use and some of the history as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching TEDxYouth at HIS 2022. We hope you enjoyed the event.
Be sure to subscribe to the official school YouTube channel and like this video.
Stay tuned for next year's event, TEDxYouth at HIS 2023.
See you next year.
I feel nothing, I feel great. I leave my body by mistake. I feel nothing, I feel great. I leave my body by mistake. I know there's water when I'm dreaming.